will not be taken. Roll call vote. District 1, District 2,
Gomez is here.
and District 3, Antonori is here. All supervisors are present and in person. I will go now to Ms. Gilman to explain what we are doing here with agenda item number 1.
So again, last week, as we talked about the general fund budget, discussion briefly touched on the flood control district and how those funds and cash carry forward contingencies are managed and what the future rate might be. So we wanted to bring you more information to address some of those questions and get direction from the board regarding that budget specifically. So I will turn it over to Joe, our Deputy County Administrator.
Yeah, so, there lots of conversation on the floodplain on how the board wants to move forward on that, and want to make sure we kind of have a good way ahead on what it is that you guys are looking for moving forward with the floodplain. And so up here is a list of the projects, and one of the questions that came up was, we have, all this money in contingency, can we just use that, zero out the tax or go close to zero and just use that money moving forward? And so this is just kind of a list of the projects that we have on the docket for the next year that, either construction or planning is scheduled to happen, and where that money would be expended. And if we were to zero that out, we could have that discussion on what projects would have to start to be, reduced, eliminated, so on and so forth. And not that we want to go over that discussion today, but that's kind of the whole concept here. The first, do we want to go down each of these individual projects, or do you guys want to have that, kind of open conversation?
We got monitoring, design, and stuff like that that doesn't produce any water. So to spend like buku amounts of money on stuff that really doesn't do it.
I would agree. I'm not a big fan of that either. I think the money should be spent on building stuff, not paying somebody to go down and walk around and say, yep, there's no water here. So,
So a lot of the planning that's been done up to this point was figuring out. So for instance, the Riverstone, oh no, it wasn't Riverstone, the Palominas recharge project, a lot of that study was see what is the best method for the recharge. I understand there's some concern on that one, but whether we do a borehole, whether we put riprap, whether it's sand, gravel, and so they have 13 different stations out there to test and see what's the most efficient way, and then take that knowledge and spread it out throughout the county when they do the various recharge projects. Okay. So I fully understand and what you're saying, but that's the reason why that specific one was done.
You talking about Riverstone?
Correct.
Yeah, I think, well, we get pictures out there in the lobby of giant concrete structures over there by the Palominas old school. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to make sure I make a point to come down here when it's raining really hard and see if there's any water in it. But so far I haven't seen any water in it. And then every time I drive over Highway 92, there's no water in the Highway 92 bridge. And lately, every time I go by the little Palominas bridge, there is water. So it's a different kind of scenario here. It isn't what people might think unless they've been around here for a while. They might not understand. Yep. The river is the water table, and so to go to all the stuff that is on the Sierra Vista side or the river side and say, we have this big catastrophe about not enough water in the river and not enough water for the fort and not enough water for Sierra Vista when the river table, the water table is the river. And I have a really hard time with that because you're trying to sell something to people that isn't true. Whereas on the other side of the mountain, where people have to go down 400 or 600 feet to get water, yeah, that's a problem. So, and I think it's part of the general scam which I've talked to you about, and I just passed out a couple handouts to my colleagues that have to do with what people say the aquifer is, and I showed it to you the other day. So let's be honest to people about what the water is around here, because my observation is that people are going to try to come get our water, and it's inevitable.
What I wish I had, I forgot to bring it. I actually left it sitting on my desk at the house. I have the ADWR reports for estimated water in the aquifer, and it shows the San Pedro Basin being pretty healthy.
That was from the, what, in,
Yeah, the percentage of draw versus the amount of water is what I'm getting at, right? So what we're seeing in our neck of the woods, because you and I both now have AMAs, that we are seeing a significant reduction, like Mr. Crosby just pointed out. I also would argue, this is just my perception, that all the attention went to the San Pedro River. That's where everybody was screaming. So all the recharge efforts, all that was going into the San Pedro and the sprinkler or whatever it is. And as a result of that, the other side of the mountain, on our side of the mountain,
Right.
was not. So this is just my 2 cents. I would like to see more efforts to do recharge out where I'm at, and talking to the ranchers and the farmers out there, getting the water into the ground before it hits the dry lake bed, and putting stuff up like gabion walls and stuff in the various creeks and draws to reduce the speed of flow so that it has time to perk down would be far better flood district money spent, and it controls flooding, than putting concrete washes and lining
Have you
concrete.
seen those pictures over there? You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a heck of a lot cheaper than concrete. I even had a couple people call me and tell me they'd be willing to work for free if we bought them the gabion screening and drop the rocks off for them. They would go out and they would lay them in the various areas. And this is where I think there would be some engineering that would have to occur on where that would be. And of course, there's all these rules on how high they could be, but what's that? Before it's a dam. Yeah, but that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to be, all we're doing now is managing water flow and diverting it.
Studying.
Yeah, and studying. And that's why I really want to see if I had
I don't think we need to study anymore.
yeah, my two colleagues here would probably, I'm not trying to ascertain votes here. I want to be clear, but I know where Mr. Crosby stands. He wants to go to 1 penny, reduce it down to 1 cent, which still says we're
Doing something.
doing something. But I think, I would like to see, particularly with the issue that we're dealing with, even though it will not solve the issue by any means, all right, it will slow the bleeding down. The patient is still going to die eventually, but are they going to die in a week or are they going to die in 2 years? That's the question that I think we should be looking at. So unless the drought suddenly goes away and we get a ton of rain, and I'm worried this year because I've heard this year's monsoon is being predicted to be a much better monsoon. Yeah, we're supposed to see more rain.
that's what they say, when they're all saying all the rest.
Yeah, so what I'm going to see, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to see, and you know it.
Okay.
You're going to see a lot of flooding down in Hereford. You're going to see a lot of flooding, people screaming down there, and
And
because that's
nothing.
right. Yeah, right. So, and then we're going to have a ton of water in the dry lake bed, which is like concrete right now, which is just going to evaporate and go back in the atmosphere when we could have been finding a way to channel that in the ground. But it'll be too late. We don't have time to fix it now. But I'm saying as we see more rainfall, we need to be focusing on slowing water flow down rather than diverting it down to this nice concrete wash and bringing it out somewhere, And then all of this, the Sierra Vista affluent design recharge pond, right? So what is that? What is that?
Which one was that?
The
Riverstone.
210K for to design a recharge pond. I'm trying to figure out why does it cost 210K to design a hole in the ground that you're going to just let water pour into so it could seep back into the ground? What does that entail, Joe?
So I would have to to get with Jackie on that one. I don't know.
Yeah,
the
I
details of
mean,
what
that's what I'm
actually
getting back to
occurred.
Mr. Crosby's point. You're doing a lot of, I don't, there may be more to it because I'm just thinking,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's probably within that recharge, the design of the recharge pond related to the Riverstone project.
It says effluent, so it's got to be.
So it's
So-
taking City of Sierra Vista's effluent from their,
No, not quite. So when I said Riverstone earlier, that's incorrect. It was the Palominas recharge I was talking about. Riverstone is taking up the flow off of all the hard surfaces throughout Sierra Vista and trying to get that all into one location to recharge it north of the EOP. The EOP is where the effluent goes into at Sierra Vista. So this is, with all the concrete, it doesn't get a chance to soak into the ground. And so with Sierra Vista being, more urban
How are
area.
they going to get it north of the sewer plant?
No, I don't have the details on the flow of it, but that's the concept of it. It's going to be just north of the EOC.
This one on Bay Acres, like, I know the planning and zoning, and what are they got
Mhm.
you, the trailer park or something, and people are all complaining that that was going to be a real issue when it rains, because it's going to contribute to the flooding problem. So this complete design, NEPA clearance and research road,
right away.
the right of way for,
So we pay a vendor for getting the right of way for that project.
I think it's like almost a lobbyist thing where you've got the aquifer lobbying people or hydrologists.
I
The
just wanna-
hydrologists lobbying, you got the engineers lobbying.
just to satisfy my curiosity. So the immeasurable stream flow monitoring, which water basin is that? Is that the San Pedro Basin?
So that's San Pedro,
San Pedro.
Surfer, Charleston,
All right.
Keystone.
Coyote Wash, which basin is that? Where does that go?
San Pedro.
So San Pedro. Where's the horseshoe jaw go?
San Pedro.
San Pedro. Where's the Three Canyons go?
San Pedro. I
San Pedro. Where's the USGS go?
think that's all over the county.
Is that all over the county?
All over.
Okay, all over. Riverstone. Where's that
San
go?
Pedro.
San Pedro. Bob Macari, San Pedro. You know that. Bisbee Affluent. Guess where that goes? San Pedro.
And
All right. Why is everything going down there?
There for a lark,
This is
for a
back.
series of years.
This guy's right. This is that Sprinka crybaby crowd. And I am getting more and more convinced every day that we need to get rid of that thing
But
and shut that down
Back to the
because that's what they're diverting all this money
And water.
and
okay,
water.
but, okay,
So
let's
let's
just,
just remind you that a lot of where that came from in the past was related to the litigation as it impacts Fort Huachuca and maintaining the
That's why we got to get
emissions
rid of
on
it, so
Fort
they
Huachuca.
don't mess with Fort Huachuca, because you've got this eternal battle between United States government Army versus United States government EPA or BLM, okay?
how does the Fort Huachuca pay for some of this?
They
do.
Well, I thought you were talking last
We're
week.
the
They need to.
They can't defend themselves.
Now they can't.
But
They have an opportunity that they need to seize right now. And I told that on the phone call. We were on the call with the garrison commander, and they were like, "Oh, we're going through the thing." No, you need to run it up the chain of command right now. They need to run it up the chain of command and get the national security declaration that they're an essential national security asset and no one's allowed to touch them. And then that's it.
So
Okay.
let's just finish though what he was doing. So alert, this rain gap, where is that?
All over.
All over county.
That's all over.
Bay Acres would be the Douglas Basin.
That's Douglas? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's like
Douglas.
between the city and the highway.
Yeah,
All right.
but it's really part of the city. I think
All
they're
right.
going to try to annex it. Leslie Canyon would be
Douglas.
Oh, that's
the
Douglas.
Douglas Basin. And then the Pomeroon, that's
Pomerine, that's up
Pomerine.
north in Pomerine Road in Benson area.
That's the south end or the
would that
north
be
end of the
Wilcox?
watershed.
That's-
It's San Pedro.
Benson,
San Pedro.
But
too.
it's not a recharge. It's the road itself floods.
Okay.
And so this would be alleviated.
And that's another study. What, don't you have templates? I mean, we must have been dealing with this stuff. I mean, it's like every single thing has to be a study.
So I think we're in agreement that we need to shift on that side. A lot of the studies, though, if you take a look, there's different ground quality and, things like that. That's got to
Okay.
be studied. So there's,
In a region, there must be studies that we could use that have been done before, because it's like, no, so you have the Wilcox Basin study, right? The watershed studies?
Study, what kind of study?
That's Wilcox. That's
the Wilcox.
Okay, you got one. Okay, and then the no activity line, this is just,
This is where we get the department's budget for wages and benefits and
contingency flooded roads showing $1 million.
so the $1 million, that's part of the roads piece that we want to
Mhm.
put money to start to improve the drainage on the roads and improve roads. But, talking with the floodplain department, we're in agreement that money needs to be shifted to the other side of the county. We talked about that as shifting the direction over there. And as I hear from you guys, that's the direction.
Because then we could maybe have some, in the big scheme of it, we could have some grass, and the Mexican wolf could be, the elves could come, and because we have more water, and then the wolves would go after the elk instead of after.
Well,
the cow.
Don, I would be so sarcastic about that because, that, if we do it right, and talking to those, because these guys are actually on the ranchers, so I'm pointing over here. Because we had the wolf guys over here and we had the ranch guys over here. So these guys over here all are actually the guys that were telling me that they're in favor of doing that, is putting up these retentions using gabion rock wall structures.
I was kind of being sarcastic in the sense that,
Right.
If we are going to deal with this, this would be, like you say, the way to do it, because we're so dry over there on this side of it's unbelievable. Sierra Vista looks pretty darn good.
And our roads are paved.
And you guys
No, but I mean that. But I mean that's that to me.
Yeah.
We should both sides will be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
With that.
A win-win.
The win-win, right?
Yeah.
So you put them up, then
So you get
you've
the
got
natural grass, then you get the elk coming down to the valley.
well,
in hopefully.
you retain more water for both cattle and
That's for
wildlife.
the wildlife, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You keep the water from going down to the dry lake bed. The sandhill cranes are going to cry, but that's okay.
And so therefore then the cow ranchers aren't giving water to the wolves and then having all the feed right there from the cattle right there.
Right, there's other places for them to
Right.
to get their water. So you're not coalescing the prey and the predator in the same water hole. Like
And
you
so-
see in Wild Kingdom, like that guy talked about.
And so just as you see so much going to Sierra Vista, in other issues too, you have to be aware of not putting so many things into Sierra Vista.
No, but to Tom's point, this is all getting driven by the Sprinka, right?
it is driven by litigation that impacts Fort Huachuca.
Okay, you can defend them, I got you, but
However, it all initiates, and it's something that is baloney, which is implementation of the Sprink in 1988, which was
And
That's
yet,
what I was gonna ask.
and I understand where you're coming from, but and yet
I do
here
not
we
believe
are.
with the current administration that the fort needs the Sprinka to survive. I think there is a way for them to.
it absolutely doesn't.
Until that changes on the books, though, we are where we are.
What,
On the rules that Fort Huachuca has to operate under.
That's up to them, but the Sprinka is not in the ARSs. You look at a whole bunch of national parks and lands, stuff like that are in the ARSs. The Sprinka is not. It is not federal land. Wasn't recognized, wasn't ceded, all that kind of stuff.
it kind of seems to me that this was 1988, you can see the damage having all this construction
one
in
could-
one area is done.
Yeah, one could make the case that we're diverting, now, your whole case, we're diverting water now from the Wilcox and Douglas basins over to supplement the fort.
And that's why we have to have.
No, we are.
AMAs.
We are, because what we're doing is we're doing all the recharge in the Sprinka, in the San Pedro, right? So you're getting a recharge benefit, so you're putting water into that for the sake of the fort at the expense of putting water into the Wilcox and Douglas basins. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So you have a net water differential that is occurring because you're putting the resources for recharge in one basin.
Okay, yeah. I just want to make sure we didn't think we were transferring.
No, you're not transferring. Mother Nature's doing that. She's raising it up into the clouds, and then it goes over the mountain and rains in Sierra Vista, and it goes down. But that's what I'm getting at. I'm just rather than get,
So,
I know Mr. Crosby wants to go to one penny, but instead of getting rid of the flood district money, maybe there's a better way.
And then we can continue to have those discussions of what to phase out. Some things are under contract or grant agreements, and so we can go.
They should immediately all begin getting phased out.
Inflation adjustment.
They should all immediately be getting
And I
phased out.
really don't understand the 251,000 for Bay Acres. I mean, it's just a bunch, yeah, okay. I'm saying this. There are a lot of mobile homes, but it's a lot of junk. It's like I can see all the appliances and gas stoves and everything that's just piled up being a problem for when it does rain. It's going to cause flooding because it's a mess. So I just think that that's a waste, and I'd like to know what.
And in June, we're going to have a more in-depth work session with flood control.
Okay,
And
so they can explain what all these things
to go
are.
into, yeah.
Because
We just wanted to give you-
I could use so much better ways.
Did I take your thunder or anything?
No,
The more you wanted to say?
Nope.
I
So
kind
this
of.
is $3 million right here. $3 million right there.
Which one?
The bottom one, the last one.
Mhm. And that's the,
well, yeah,
The no activity line.
that's the wages, that's all the employees in flood control. The others are all specific to projects, so that's more the operations, and also $1 million for potential roads, upgrading roads and things like that, doing the flood control for those roads rather. Yeah, that's more of the operations of the flood control as well.
Okay.
It's that $1 million contingency for that.
So the flood control to maintain all these and make all those improvements on the roads for when the floods do occur, right? Are in this budget, okay.
Mhm.
So I understand, the strategic direction it was going. We need to make a shift on that. Be working on that. I think I know what you guys are looking for now. And so in June, when we come back with that work session on the projects, hopefully have some better projects that might.
I'm looking forward to discussions after the monsoon.
I think we should be really looking.
See what the
at it,
monsoon
too.
does,
I think
yeah.
when it happens, we all need.
I might just take a car out of the motor pool and drive around for 2 weeks all over the county and see where all the water's at.
So we are getting some mapping done to help show that, these roads are flooding, at these 5 spots,
Yeah.
consistently during monsoons and things like that. So there's data that we're trying to put together.
All right.
That we know we're putting money to as well.
All right.
All right. Well, next meeting is going to be the jail district board of directors for the presentation by the Chin Planning on the draft report for jail planning study. So with that, we're adjourned.